Greetings, psychology students. Welcome into another short lecture. This time we're going to continue our discussion with, we're in the chapter of schizophrenia, and we said that there's other psychotic disorders that resemble schizophrenia in certain ways, but do not fit neatly in the heading of schizophrenia. So this is another example of that. The one we're going to focus on now is called delusional disorder, which, as we discussed with schizophrenia, sometimes they have delusions. So we're going to look at this particular disorder. All right, so delusional disorder, here we go. Okay, so persistent beliefs contrary to reality. So remember, delusions are unfounded beliefs. So in this case, they're having persistent beliefs contrary to reality. These can persist for several years. For example, people are trying to poison me, and yet there's no evidence of that, as an example. So they're going to really, the main sort of symptom of this one is the delusions, these unfounded beliefs that they have. But when we look at the other symptoms of schizophrenia, they are absent. So, for example, they do not have the flat affect, the anhedonia, or other negative symptoms that we've mentioned before. Due to this reason, because of the paranoia and the delusional beliefs, they may be socially isolated as a function of the delusion. So, for example, if you were suspicious of others, it would be hard to establish relationships and form bonds with other people. So, quite often, they may be socially isolated from people. So, our DSM does give us different specific types of delusional disorder. Okay, so we have these different subtypes. So the first one is erotomanic. And so this is the irrational belief that one is loved by another person. In most cases, it's a romantic type love rather than saying a sexual infatuation. So they believe that someone is in love with them. And usually, typically, it's someone of higher status, such as a celebrity, that may not even know that person, for example, but they believe that they're in love with them. So that celebrity is in love with me, for example. Keep in mind, this could be a complete stranger, but a lot of times it is someone who has higher status than the actual person. The second subtype is called the grandiose type. So we definitely talked about this with schizophrenia. And so this is the belief in where they have an inflated sense of worth, power, knowledge, identity, or some kind of special relationship to a deity or famous person. In other words, they believe that they're important for some reason. Once again, there's no evidence to support this, is the problem. And so this delusion often surrounds those grandiose type beliefs that they're special in some way or have something important about them. The third subtype given to us by the DSM is the jealous type, pretty self-explanatory, where they may believe their sexual partner, for example, is being unfaithful, and yet in reality that is not the case, or there's no evidence to support that. So, for example, this person may follow their spouse without their spouse's knowledge of this. Another example would be maybe they analyze stains on their bed sheets, thinking that something, unfaithful happened or something like that. So pretty self-explanatory with this one is they believe that their partner is being unfaithful and is betraying them in some way. All right, our fourth one is the persecutory type. So they believe that they're being persecuted is the point. So this could be inwardly directed that someone is persecuting me, but it could also be someone close to them. Uh, so in other words, I'm being treated in such a way that's not fair and is mean, for example. So someone is trying to poison me, someone is spying on me, for example, or they're trying to keep me from obtaining my life goals, as an example. So someone is trying to persecute me, as an example. And once again, yet we consider this to be completely delusional with no evidence to support that. Okay, and then we have the somatic type, where the person feels afflicted by some type of physical defect or general medical condition, once again, not backed up by their doctor or whoever. So, for example, they may believe that they have a parasite inside them that's infecting them and eating them alive, and yet when they get tests and so forth, there's no evidence to support that. So typically, these delusions that we see in this disorder differ from schizophrenia because they could actually happen. So some of them could actually happen. So, for example, your spouse definitely could be cheating on you, or excuse me, your spouse could definitely be cheating on you. That could happen. I'm not saying it is or whatever. So what's different from schizophrenia is a lot of times with the schizophrenic delusions, they seem just completely out of reach and just unbelievable. Some of these could actually happen and they're focusing on it, and yet once again, there is no evidence to support that. So once again, your girlfriend could be cheating on you, but does not necessarily mean it is happening. All right, so let's take a look at some other research surrounding this disorder. So delusional disorder is thought to be extremely rare. So they've estimated that it's extremely, extremely rare. So 24 to 60 people out of every 100,000. So I mean, one of our rarest disorders of all time. It's definitely in that realm. So it's thought to be extremely, extremely rare. What's interesting about this one is that the average age of onset is typically middle age. So if we go by the research and when people are first admitted to a psychiatric facility, for example, what is their average age? It tends to be about 35 to 55. So this is one of those disorders that seems to kind of occur later in life. However, it could be due to the fact that they've had it a long time and never have sought treatment. Because a lot of these people can certainly function in their life, even though they're dealing with this stuff, they can still hold jobs and have relationships and appear basically normal. So it may be that the person is living with this, but then finally it gets to the point where they seek help. So that may be why we see it sort of later in age. But regardless, the research is pointing that usually is diagnosed from 35 to 55, as we mentioned. It is slightly more common in females. So if we look at the studies, it's about 55% female, 45% male. So a slight edge there, but pretty comparable in terms of biological sex. The prognosis of delusional disorder is a lot better than schizophrenia. Because remember, a lot of them are basically, appear normal. They're functioning. So they can be married, they can hold down, for example, compared to other disorders, delusional disorder, they tend to fare pretty well, even though they're dealing with these delusional beliefs, they tend to be doing okay. We have a do seem to occur more often among relatives of people that have delusional disorder. So those two specific traits, suspiciousness and jealousy, we're seeing evidence that it may be genetically influenced. However, a lot of the studies are mixed, as we said. Furthermore, a lot of other conditions can actually mimic this. So, for example, certain aspects of substance abuse, specifically things like amphetamines and cocaine, can create delusional beliefs and paranoia. Does the person have a brain tumor? Do they have some type of disease? So it's very important for the psychologist when they're working with someone and they suspect this to rule out those other similar problems that may be contributing to the delusional beliefs. So if that was the case, they would give them a different diagnosis that's surrounding substance abuse, for example, if they were using meth and having delusional beliefs as a result of that. So once again, In this particular case, we're saying it's not connected to a disease or using substances. It's in and of itself, if you would. All right, so that will basically conclude this particular lecture. Please move on to the next step in the class.